Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Intralingo World Lit podcast. I'm Lisa Carter, founder and creative director of Intralingo, and your host. Today, I am very pleased to be welcoming Max Lobe and Ros Schwartz, the author and translator of A Long Way from Douala, a novel set in Cameroon. So Ros and Max, thank you so much for being here. It's really wonderful to be able to connect. Ros, you're in the UK. Max, you're in Switzerland. I'm here in Canada, and we can still gather to talk about this wonderful book. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Max, I'll start with you. So I was telling Ros before you came here that something I always find interesting is the blurb on the back of the book. So this is the book, A Long Way from Douala. The blurb on the back of the book is sometimes very different from the way that you might speak about the book. So Max, if you're just telling a friend, this is my book, this is what it's about, how do you introduce it?
Ooh, Lisa, this is a huge question. It's always difficult to answer to that question, actually, because when somebody, if it was a friend asking me the question, like, what is the book about? I would have asked him to go and read the book.
and we will encourage everyone to read the book. Don't worry.
So what I can say is like what I wanted to write about is the migration situation with Africa, but not just the migration like that, but to talk precisely about the path that young people take to go to Europe, and decide that to talk about Boko Haram, doing some really bad things in not just in Cameroon, but you can say also in Nigeria, in Niger, and of course about homosexuality. I mean, the topics are religion, family, and LGBT.
Yeah, this book has so much. It is such a slim little book, but it covers so many topics, and we'll get to some of those as well. But Max, for your own story, so the protagonist in A Long Way from Douala is Jean. He's a young man around 18 or so. His brother has set off heading for Europe, and Jean and his brother Simon go after Roger to look for him. So, there's a lot in there, as you say, but your own story, you also left Cameroon, not in the same way, presumably, but I would just love to hear your connection to Cameroon. You've been in Europe for a really long time. What was that transition for you?
This is very interesting because most of the time when people ask me if I also made the journey to Mediterranean and through the wilderness in the Sahara, I used to say, yeah, definitely I did. And it's a way for me to joke because I like joking, to tell about things that are really painful to me. But my own story about migration is like I was in Cameroon. I was 16 or 18, yeah, because I got my bachelor degree, let's say the high school diploma. I was 16 in Cameroon, and I went to university. I was 16, and then one day I already had one of my sisters here in Switzerland, in the Italian part of Switzerland. And one day, my mother called me in her bedroom and she said, will you be interested to pursue your studies in Switzerland? I was like, are you kidding me? What kind of question are you asking me? Definitely yes. So 3 months later, I moved to Switzerland. And after been living now in Switzerland for 17 years, maybe. Time is passing, it's passing so fast. So, yeah. And I started in the Italian part of Switzerland. I studied journalism and communication sciences. And then I moved to Lausanne, where I studied public administration and politics. So this country is really my body, my like my blood. I know the history, the political side of the country. And now I've been living in Geneva for almost, for 10, 11 years, where I did a lot of stuff here. And since years, I just write. I just do that. Everything I do is around literature. Also for literary empowerment of African young writers. So it's my whole life, and I take all the consequences and all the flowers, all the good things that comes out. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's fabulous. And so, Max, you write in French, or at least this book in French. Maybe you write in other languages too. And Ros, you're the translator who thankfully brought us this book in English. So, how did your collaboration come about?
My collaboration with?
Yeah, with
Ros.
Ros.
Yeah. I had translated a short story by Max 2 or 3 years earlier for Words Without Borders.
Okay.
And Pete Ayrton, the publisher of Hope Road, I think had read that story and decided to investigate this writer. And I'd worked with Pete for many, many years, and he offered me this book. So that's how I ended up being the translator of this book. And the collaboration was, I knew that I needed to seek Max out. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to ask him about certain things. I mean, I was out of my comfort zone, I think it's fair to say. I have traveled in Africa, but not in Cameroon. And there were a lot of things I needed to check out with Max. So I went to Switzerland to meet him. There's a wonderful translators house in Lauren where I was able to stay, and Max came to meet me. And it was an absolutely wonderful 2 or 3 days where we were able to discuss aspects of the book. Max explained a lot of things to me, and I realized just how important it is it's the sense of the rhythm of the language, hearing the author's voice. You know, you're not just translating the words, but you're trying to capture that author's voice. And now, whenever I'm translating Max, I can hear him. I can hear his laugh, the music of his language, and we brainstormed certain things. Max gave me a lot of a free rein on certain things where a straight translation wouldn't work, where rhythm and music were much more important, and we played with language together and came up with things that I wouldn't have done on my own.
Oh, that's just brilliant. That is so special that, you are close enough that was possible, that's fabulous. So Max, you wrote the novel in, I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, but Camfranglais. Can you just explain a little bit about what that is? And then Ros, I would love for you to talk about what that was like for you.
There was something really important to say to people who are going to watch us. I'm francophone, French is my mother tongue, but I'm used to say my mother tongue is French, but French from Cameroon. Because as a Cameroonian, if I speak English, I hope I'm making it.
Perfect.
It's also because Cameroon is a bilingual country. The Anglophone side of Cameroon now is facing a very difficult situation that is just into brackets. And as a good Cameroonian guy, I'm used to speak both the languages since my childhood. The Camfranglais is in between the two languages. It's a kind of Cameroonian Creole that was very used by youth people. But as I used to say, you notice that a language becoming a natural language of the country when politics started using it. Today, you will see people making their political campaign and they speak the Camfranglais. Camfranglais is not just a mix of French and English, but it's also like with some national languages like Basa, Sandeti, Bamileke, and also the meaning of some words, like you can say something in French, like you use the normal word in French, but it has a different meaning. And this for me also to work the language because writing, I think, is everybody has done it. A lot of writers who use French to say what I want to say today. And so for me, the new thing that I bring up is really the work of language. I consider myself like somebody like somebody working with the Marie Claire, like pottery, and I try to make it a vase, a base with with this language. And so it's really I was not thinking about the translators, but it's really a tough work for them. I'm realizing it.
I bet. So what was that like for you, Ros, to sort through the language and then convey, that mixture, that vase that Max is talking about?
Well, I mean, that's actually a very sort of political and ethical question, because I was very aware that Max was doing something that needed to be preserved. And the way he did it, and I think possibly because Max is writing in French, but based in Europe, he's very aware of what a French-speaking reader, but based in Europe, can cope with, if you like. So in a way, he included all the Camfranglais language in a way that was sort of self-explanatory. So even if you didn't know exactly what the word meant, you got it in the context. And I think he might have written it very differently if he was writing just for a Cameroonian audience. But I think that because it would have been, those words would have been as foreign to a French reader as to an English reader, I kept them, and I kept them in a way that, I mean, for example, there's a word that he uses in Camfranglais to mean prostitute. Now it comes in a whole list of words meaning prostitute. So it's clear that this word means prostitute, and then when it comes in afterwards, you know what it is. The publisher asked me to produce a glossary, which personally I didn't think was essential, because readers aren't stupid, but so the glossary went at the back and it was there if people wanted it. So in a way that wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be, simply because of the way Max incorporated those words in a way that you understood in the context anyway. And I think it's enriching for readers to see these words, to learn these words, because anybody who reads a book that is set somewhere else is clearly a curious reader. So I'm not in favor of pandering to readers or making things too easy for readers. The glossary is there if they want it, but I think really it was really important to keep those words in. And I learned what Camfranglais was. A little introduction at the beginning to explain to readers what this language was. And I think it's enormously enriching.
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate that tidbit of how it read in the French for you, because that gives me a better sense of understanding that it was the same experience for me in the English. So, I mean, I know a little bit of French. I'm from Canada, but I from a different part of Canada where I didn't learn French, fluently, but reading it, everything is perfectly self-explanatory within the text. And like you, I don't love glossaries in books, but I will admit
nobody loves them.
No, it's true, isn't it? But I will admit that I did look at it later just to see, what is there additional information here? What else can I glean? And so I didn't need it, but I appreciated it.
It's there if you want it. And I would like to add something else. And I think this is something for translators to think about. There are lots of writers writing in English, in different Englishes, who have many more foreign words than translated books. Junot Díaz, half of his books are in Spanish with absolutely no explanation. There's whole dialogues in Spanish. There are Indian writers who have whole dialogues in some of the Indian languages without any explanation. And it's fine. It's kind of like walking through the street, hearing conversations coming out of windows. When we translate, both translators and publishers get really anxious about foreign words. And I think we need to keep those words in as much as possible.
Oh, I agree with you so much, Ros. I think that is just so true. I just finished reading a book with one of my reading groups called Love After Love, and it's by Ingrid Persaud, who's a Trinidadian writer, and she writes in Trini Creole. And everything is perfectly understandable, but it's beautiful because we can hear the rhythm and we can sense, like you say, it feels like we are there. And there's nothing that takes away from the experience. It only adds to the experience, I think.
I just wanted to add something. It's like I think that the Commonwealth have done a lot of have made a lot of efforts to accept that new use, a different use of English compared to the Francophonie. For the Francophonie, France is a very centralized country, and so is all the institutions like the Francophonie, but also they have the Académie Française. So if you don't use the standard language, standard French, they look at you like, where do you come from? Okay, you're from Africa. And that's why I'm so happy for the new Goncourt, even though he uses really the very standard language. But for the translation of my language, of that language that I use to write my text into English with a glossary, for me it was a little bit weird, but I understood it with my publisher, the way in French. We decided since my first novel not to put any glossary because in the context in French, everybody will understand it, although they say, it's really bizarre. But I definitely understand. Most of all, is the first translated book in English. So we're going to see how people are going to welcome it, and then maybe for the upcoming novels and the novels coming in English, translated by us. And yesterday we were still together. No, I think Russ and I, we are like, we are like living in the same bedroom. Actually, not in the same house, the same bedroom. We know each other so well now.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, it just really, like, it is so special when an author and a translator are able to work closely like that, because you get all of the book, you get the voice behind the voice, which is fabulous. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add something else, that translating into English and being very aware of it being one of the big languages and a colonizing language, I think as a translator, you have to be very careful not to colonize the translation and not to make it sound like these people are sitting somewhere in North London, and to preserve the specificity of the country, the language, the culture. And it's a battle we often have with publishers who tend to, not this particular publisher, I hasten to add, but some publishers want to flatten things, standardize things, and presume to say, you know, well, the readers won't understand that. So it's something I think that translators need to be very conscious of and be prepared to fight their corner.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, you set a fabulous example, and I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, as translators, we have a very important role to play in changing things that way. So
Anyway,
yeah.
she couldn't colonize it because I always had an eye.
That's right. Yes.
And she couldn't make it. Like I was always like, okay. And when we met up in London, yeah, because she mentioned it at the
Yes.
beginning, I was just so happy to spend this time together with her. And sometimes, you know, we were just reading the text aloud, and she wanted to understand or to listen to the noise of the voice pronouncing those words, and together we were trying to, you know, to find something that could be exactly to follow exactly the idea that I had writing the text in the original version in French. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Max, let's give the example that we talked about yesterday. You remember when you said Nzambe, and I made you say it, and I couldn't get yeah. So in the text, a character says Nzambe, as Max just said it, and I couldn't get what the feeling behind that was. And so Max explained to me that it was kind of a sigh of relief. And so Nzambe is God. So we ended up with thank Nzambe, or thanks be to Nzambe, rather than this sort of onomatopoeic sound that would have been clear to somebody reading it in Cameroon, but not either to a French or an English reader. So we had to get the feeling behind the words there.
That's a fabulous example. Yeah, that's great. And Ros,
definitely we spent like I don't know, 10 minutes yesterday to try to, because it was just like you feel relief, you feel like the news that have just given to you is setting you free. You were like suspended waiting for something. And in French, in the first version in French, it's just like hey, I felt just like they took away a burden from my shoulder. And yeah, I'm not getting the translation in English. People are just going to discover.
Yes. And that's in the next book, the book that you're working on currently.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, I have to say that even in A Long Way from Douala, like part of what I loved about this book was that feel, that vibrancy. There was so much color and noise and chaos, and it comes through in the scenes, of course, but also in the language. So Ros, how did you experience that as a reader first and as a translator, and conveying that?
Well, although I hadn't been to Cameroon at that point, I had been to a number of African countries. So I could sort of recognize the bus stations, the noise, the cries, the clamor, the smells, the food. And I mean, good writing draws on all the senses. So you need to smell and hear and see and taste things. So I was very conscious of that, and could see in my own mind these scenes, and Max describes them so vividly. So, you have to be able to visualize yourself what it is you're describing. And then just towards the end of the translation, I actually went to Cameroon, to Yaoundé. By coincidence, I was working with a publisher there, Backward Books, and the University of Bristol, who had organised a translation training workshop. So I actually spent some time on the ground.
Fabulous. So I was going to ask
she's
you.
waiting for her Cameroonian pass. I don't know if they are going to deliver it to her.
That's so great. I was going to ask you about the translation workshop because you mentioned it at the end of the book in your acknowledgement portion, Ros, and you mentioned a chef, and I was like, oh my gosh. So you got to taste and all of that.
Yeah. So one of the things I did at this workshop, although I was actually there as the instructor, I asked my students to critique my translation of Max's book. And that was a humbling experience because they pulled it apart, and rightly so. But it was a very useful experience for me to remind me of just how important knowledge on the ground is.
Yeah.
And in the book, there's a lot of food. And the students asked, we had a caterer who brought in our food every day. The students asked the caterer to cook the foods that were in the book. So I got to taste all the foods that Max had described.
That is fabulous. I have to say, Max, after reading this book, I did a Google search for Cameroonian restaurants in my city because I'm desperate to try.
Definitely. I tend to give me like a kind of abo for the advertisement I made for Cameroonian food.
You should, yes. Yeah. Oh, what a fabulous experience, Ros. That's great. Yeah. So, Max, the heart of the book, though, is the topics, it's the themes, it's the stories that you mentioned at the beginning, which is this notion of it's the protagonist's coming of age, his own journey, his family relationship. But then there's the whole span of, like you said, the political and social context of Cameroon and West and Central Africa. You put a lot in the book, but never is it heavy. There is enough information that we get a really deep sense, but we're never overwhelmed. And there's this beautiful light tone to everything. There's humor and life and light. And can you just talk about that and how you did that and why you did that?
Before answering to the question, I would like to mention something. We are used really, in French we say écrire à l'eau. Like I go to the phone and I really want the book to change, not because I hate fat people, no, or fat books, no. It's just like I always think we should try to complex to put it all together in few words, using few words, and to make it quick and deep what we want to say instead of explaining everything and to make something huge, a big book that somebody can read. Sometimes it happens to me as a moderator and journalist to prepare a moderation for in one night. I have 500 pages and I read it like this and I understand everything in 2 hours. It's true. The first idea, the first thing I wanted to talk about was Boko Haram because at the beginning I listened to radio, international radio and newspapers talking about Boko Haram acting also in Cameroon, and I was like, oh my God, we thought at the beginning that it was just a Nigerian problem, like the COVID situation. Everybody was saying it's just a Chinese situation. We try always to put everything to other people. And when we noticed that we were also affected by that, I was so touched. I was just like, oh my God, what is happening to my home country? And so I decided to go back there, and I did that journey. I traveled from Douala to the far north of Cameroon in Maroc, and I used exactly the same means, like the train, the buses, everything. And actually, I was supposed also to make a reportage, a big reportage about the Cameroon facing terrorism You can find it easily on Google. You just put Max Lobe Cameroon terrorism, and I did 3 big reportages for Le Monde, you know. So after the journey, I was like, okay, I have all this material, but a novel is not an article. A novel is not a
Yes.
reportage. So I need to find a story. I need to find something. And of course, for people who are discovering me, I have some topics that my readers already know, like sex, course, sex, race, LGBT, and religion. Also, because I was brought up into religion and evangelism and Pentecostal churches. Can somebody say amen? So I said, okay, I'm going to talk about my mother. That's, you understand me when I say I'm going to talk about my mother. I started. I let it in my body. You need to take some distance to have also the nuance. And I said, okay, I will start it like this with the birth of the father. And actually, it's the first time I talk about the father in the book, and because most of the time I talk about my mother, and for the first time I talked about my father, it was about his death. If you see, for example, I don't know, it's the fourth or fifth chapter, talking about the funeral of the father, the way Jean was killed at his father, it's exactly what I had as experience at the funeral of my father. So for me, it was really interesting to talk about the 3 main religions of Cameroon, meaning Christianism, Islam, and maybe the first one is football.
That's right. Yes.
It's football, and let me tell you, Cameroon is organizing the African Nation Cup next year. I think at the beginning of the year. So actually it's very nice between for this book. I think in Cameroon you cannot be a Cameroonian without knowing football.
Without knowing
It's
football.
it's like an obligation. Even for me, you see me very womanish, and I was a very bad football player. But I said I want to talk about that, and for people who are going to read it, you will see, you will understand why we have that cover with a beautiful guy, big lips, back, and the football, and the ball, Um, so yeah. Today, Cameroon is facing a really. Every time I want to talk about Cameroon, I feel tired. I feel tired. The last book I wrote in French, Thomas is talking about tyranny. Um, yeah, we've been living with that tyrant for half a century. And for me, it's just like enough is enough. And I think today, after Kobe, I want to do another lecture. So I want to talk about my personal life, about my intimacy, and to give up a little bit of that country because I'm not discouraged. I'm just tired.
Tired. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's understandable. We see this in your book. And it's like you said, there's religion, but there's that dark side of religion. So the extremism with, Islam, so the Islamist extremists in Boko Haram, but also the mother who is taken in by, corrupt, scammy churches, and we see the bribery, and we see, the propaganda. Even Jean watches this beautiful documentary about the northern part of the country, and sees nothing of the reality underneath. There's a lot of places that are tiring, that are, going through similar things, because these are big and heavy issues.
Yeah, but it's, when you start talking about tyranny, my head has a lot of things coming in. Um, the Cameroonian case is very specific because it's so long. It's been lasting for 50 years. I mean, the 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 par excellence, his par excellency, has been has been president since 1982. But before he was prime minister, he was working on the presidency. So for his whole life, he has been the papa of Cameroon. And there was a young generation, even my mom, they just know him. And me now, I come to him. And you can imagine, I'm living in Switzerland. I'm a Swiss guy too. Switzerland is one of the most democratic countries in the world. And I'm discovering something else. And I'm like, it's not right what is happening over there. It's not right, not just about extremism with Islam, Christianity, and football, but also about LGBT people.
Yes.
And it's all over the book, you will see that relationship between the two protagonists, like Chang and Simon. Actually, for me, it's the core characters of the book. Like, we don't know if Jean, the narrator, is gay. Writing the book, I didn't know if he was or not. And I should mention also that it was the Gay Book Prize in France in 2018. And I was very surprised to receive that prize, because I was not writing about the gay book, but a posteriori, I understood that definitely I was, because he's discovering
Yes.
his sexuality. For example, the bear. When I was a teenage, um, as I went very fast in my studies. At the time in let's say in high school, for example, I was 15, 14, and I was with elder people, and they were used to they already they already had a bear, and they were used to tell me, even if you put a fertilizer on your sink, you're not going to have a bear. Oh, today I have a mustache. But this is a very, I think it's a pure characteristic of what masculinity might be. If you're a man and you're hairless, I don't know. So a child is discovering all that, is discovering how to dress up, and what are your thoughts when you do that lonely, lonely practice. And what is it like to be? Can we say, can you help me? Can we say he's in love with Simone? I don't know. I think he looks up to him. It's just like it's an elder brother who is a brother from another mother. I love him. I don't love him. I don't know. I don't know. Definitely.
Yeah. I think all of those are what make the book, so universal. It is the universal human experience of growing up, coming of age, not understanding yourself or your feelings. He has a very complicated relationship with his mother. He loves his mother. he can't see her as a monster, but he recognizes, the relationship between his mother and his brother. It's those things that, even though this is set in Cameroon, which I have never been to, it's just a story of people, of humans. And
Thank you so much. Thank you.
that's, that's what
Thank you.
touched me.
I want to say now I'm getting older.
You're not old, Max.
I agree with you before we were going to mock at me, to laugh at me, but yeah, I'm getting older, and yeah, I'm almost retired. But you were talking about the universality of literature.
Yeah.
This is my fourth book or fifth, I don't know. But I mean, I had already written about that topic of homosexuality, of sex and intimacy and the relationship with the mother. And with that goal, I wanted to go deep in the shape of what can be the relationship between a little boy and the mother being a black African mother. And there was something really interesting for me. It's like, if you see, for example, the Black American mothers and their sons, it's almost the same thing. Like I was reading Nitai Court in French, his book, his essay is Une colère noire. I don't recall the name in English, the title of the book in English, but there was something he said in the book. It's like the mom said to his son, if one day you die because you were knocked down by a car, then I will slap you until you wake up and tell me exactly what happened. And it's exactly the same word that my mom were used to tell me, and it's exactly the way Sita Bwanga, Sita Musima reacts with her son, Jean. So it's universal, yeah, but there was something specific to Black people, I think so.
Yes. She says at one point as well, she cannot be wrong because a mother must be a god to her children. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a very different concept for me as a child too. Yeah.
Definitely, and now spending almost half of my life in Switzerland, I can discover the positive and the negative aspect of that way of educating children. I think, yeah, I don't even know what to say because I think I haven't yet finished to go in and see again and again about what is happening in those relationships.
Mm.
In my blog, for example, let me make some advertisement for myself, maxlobe.com/blog. I talk, for example, about the shame, the shame of the mother. She was in the church, and she thought church was her family, and finally she discovered it was not that. And I think shame is something we don't talk
Mm.
often about. For me, it's my topic. I think so
Mm.
because I've been fighting against shame and shaming for my whole life, and I just discovered now I'm 35 that I've been fighting against that for my whole life, and today I'm just like, goodness, I just want to live. I
Yeah.
just I want to break free. You know, I just want to.
Yeah.
We just have one life, and I've just spent 2 years of my life at home, locked down. let, please, let me leave.
Mhm.
Let me. And I'm going to go deep in that topic in the coming book. Definitely.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I can't wait to read everything else that you read, Max, and that hopefully, Ros, you will bring to us in English, because this was really it was a joy to read. It was an experience to read. It was incredibly touching, and a book that will stay with me, for a long time to come, especially after this conversation. So thank you both so much for sharing the behind the cover, under the cover, deeper. It's really lovely to speak with you both.
I just have one question for Ross.
Yeah.
When are you inviting me to London to help you to cover Let me know. Now the borders are open. We can travel.
Yes.
Let me know. I'm coming.
My house
over.
is your house.
Yeah, we are going to do this together. Thank you so much for having us, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really a pleasure. So below the episode, all the links to the book, to purchase it. Make sure, Max, you send me the links to your blog and everything else so I can include them, because absolutely we want viewers and listeners to go out and experience your work as well. And yours, Ros, for sure. There's so much more for us to explore in your work as well. So,
well, the next book is in the pipeline. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, keep me posted.
And that is
Will do.
my heart is beating.